Hey, everybody. We have a very special guest today. Should I say council member Shayla Favor? Should I say Shayla Favor? You wear so many hats.
Yes.
We have council member Shayla Favor and candidate for prosecutor,
Yes.
Shayla Favor on the show
Yes.
with us today. Thank you for joining us. Super excited.
And because we're not just the work that we do. Listen, she's a DJ. She's a chef.
Yeah, I didn't know DJ.
Oh, you know, in my mind.
Oh, okay. Well,
In my mind.
could bring it out further.
World renowned.
Yes.
World renowned DJ. Yes.
All right.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
Of course. So yeah, I've been curious because you're always busy.
Yeah.
As a council member, how is this busy? Is this busy different, or do you feel more busy, more pressure? Like, where's your head at this point in this?
Yeah. Oh, I think on a scale of 1 to 10, it's probably like at a 20 right now in this very moment.
Yeah.
Because we have a lot that's happening with the city just in general. So I have my day job and I refuse to not show up on behalf of the residents in the city of Columbus. We just passed the largest budget in our city's history just 2 days ago. Been fighting for issues around housing and criminal justice reform. So this moment in our city's history is so incredibly important as we're grappling with the impact of this growth. And then you do have this race that has been very interesting. It is a very quick race because it is a primary.
Right.
So for all intents and purposes, I've been hitting the pavement for the last 3 months hardcore.
Yeah, I want to, like I said, you're always like busy. I see you everywhere. I always see you out in the community.
Yeah.
I don't know if I know some people do have a good sense of like who you are, where you're from, a little bit about your journey. Can you talk a little bit about kind of, where you're from and how you got here?
Yeah. I'm a Dayton girl. 937 all day long. Moved to Columbus for school. Graduated from OSU. Background political science, African studies. I always knew I was going to go to law school, but as I tell this story, I'm also a person that believes wholeheartedly in living for the journey, and so if there is something out there that I want to try or I've got a passion for, I will absolutely get out there and try. And I think that's just indicative of my character. It's how I approach life just in general as well. So before law school, I left Columbus and moved to Chicago and went to culinary school for a little while.
Okay.
Learned about
So you like to cook?
I do like to cook.
Okay.
I do like to cook.
Do you get to cook that much?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes. I just literally whipped out this mean pot of spaghetti.
Okay.
Just a day ago. We have to have some meal prepping going on
Right, you have to have
right now.
something that will last a couple days.
Yes, the way this environment is. So still love to cook to this day. And then I returned back to Columbus. My boyfriend, now husband at the time, had proposed to me, and I was ready to get started on my career in law. But, having mentioned being, quote, busy, it is important for me to be someone who is present in this community, whether I've been in an elected official capacity or just as a resident of this community. And so my husband and I are heavily invested in so many different endeavors in this community. We had the honor of just chairing the annual Columbus Museum of Arts Wonder Ball event. It's like their annual fundraiser, a party with a purpose. So we just got off the tail end of that, and just constantly doing something, whether it's supporting our youth, if it's doing various initiatives with our arts and creative space. We just are completely committed to the support and growth of this community. And that includes really diving in and supporting our residents at the same time.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about you said you always knew you wanted to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, but then I shadowed somebody that I knew who was an attorney in DC, and I was like, y'all never go home. Like, this is just not for me. So can you talk a little bit about your law journey?
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because the only experience I ever had with a lawyer was Claire Huxtable.
Yeah. Cosby's.
My mother, who has since passed, she had a short stint at Central State University. So I had just a little bit of exposure with higher education, but outside of that, I had no attorneys in my family.
So you're a first generation college student.
Yeah,
okay.
Which is wild to even think about that.
Yeah.
But I knew, having watched the Cosby Show, that that's what I wanted to emulate. That strength and the diversity of her character was so compelling to me. And so, like, using that as my reference, that is what I went to school thinking about. Well, how do I craft this career, and not really having the proper guidance along the way? I think that's why it's so important for me to mentor young folks, to be what I never had growing up.
Yeah.
Because there was a point in time where I felt like I was in the dark just trying to figure it out. And so, having gotten to the point where I was pursuing the actual degree, it almost felt like an out-of-body moment, because there's so much that goes into even getting into that point in your life, to be admitted into school. And then you are alongside some type A personalities. Everyone's driven, everybody's smart.
Yeah.
Right. And so even while in law school, I was taken back in time. I had the opportunity to speak to some students from my law school just today. And I think the trauma took me back to those times that were really rough. But just thinking about how I had to figure that part out as well.
Yeah.
And I knew that my calling always had to do with public service. But getting in that environment, it's very easy to lose your way because you're pushed to do big law or big firms or things of that nature. And listen, the money is nice.
Yeah.
The money is very nice. But I'm always going to be someone who's going to be driven by purpose, be driven by calling. And I think that public service is absolutely a calling. And so I dipped my toe in a couple of legal spaces until I settled on the Columbus City Attorney's Office.
And what did you do at the City Attorney's Office?
Yeah. So I almost worked every job that might be there. I started off as an intern. I was a paralegal. I was a criminal intake officer before I became an official attorney in a division that is called the Zone Initiative. It has a new name that's being formalized now. But the work that I was doing was really around addressing violent crime, eliminating blight in our community. And that blight could be anything from narcotics activity, drug trafficking, prostitution, housing violations, excessive noise, anything you could think of. My unit was on top of it. And I love the job that I was doing on behalf of the city of Columbus, because eliminating blight gets to the heart of protecting public safety. In the conversation of presenting my case before Franklin County as why I should be the next Franklin County prosecutor, it is incredibly interesting that there are so many people truly don't understand how this system works altogether.
Yeah.
And so the work that my unit and I had the honor of doing literally removed criminal activity, whether that was drug trafficking or prostitution, selling single cigarettes, selling alcohol to underage folks, out of gas stations, nightclubs, you name it. And overnight, communities would change. And that's what really kind of sparked my interest in even getting into like the political lane. Because I was doing that work for many years for the Near East Side, the South Side, and the downtown area. And then had the thought, well, what if we could spread this around the city of Columbus? And that's what drew me into throwing my name in the hat when a position became available on city council. And then obviously the rest is history.
Right.
But when I think about my experience as it relates to this position that I'm applying for, I also think about all of my cross-sector experience that I believe has prepared me for this moment. The reality is that when you think of prosecutor, it's almost a misnomer because people assume all you're doing is criminal prosecution.
Yeah.
But the job truly does extend beyond the courtroom. This job is laid out in our Ohio Code. So it does lay out what the duties and responsibilities are, that being one, being a prosecutor, and two, being serving in a legal advisement capacity.
Right.
And so I've gained all of that experience while serving as an assistant city attorney. But what isn't truly highlighted and what we know is incredibly important is that this is a CEO position. This office would be the third largest firm in the county. Little over 250 attorneys and supportive staff that are there. And what we know is that failed leadership does mean that the residents of Franklin County are not getting justice. They're not getting the best level of service. And it is time for change in our community. What I will also highlight for you is that I say this job extends beyond the courtroom because not only do you have a criminal and civil division that rest under this office, but there are also 35 agencies that fall under the purview of the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office that they have oversight over. Agencies like Office on Aging, Jobs and Family Services, even the Franklin County Dog Shelter. These are all agencies that need to have top-notch service so that you and I can continue to get the end product that we need at the end of the day. And so whether you are engaging directly with the criminal justice system or you're interacting with one of those agencies that I've already highlighted, at some point in time, you have to engage with this office, whether you believe it or not.
Yeah.
So even thinking about the experience I've had as a former executive director, now as a council member, having also served in leadership in the banking and insurance industries, all of that collective experience truly helps me to see this office and what it could be in a different light.
Thank you for that, because that was one of the first things that I was going to ask you, because I know in a political race, you can choose to do this or not. You can choose to attack your opponent, or you can choose not to. I have heard people say they feel like you are unqualified for this role. You just walk down your qualifications. One thing I want you to tell the people is where do you see the intersections of your role on city council and the experience that you've gained there, and how that would be helpful, if at all, if you see it that way, in your prosecutor's position, if you are elected into that position?
Oh, it absolutely intersects. The first point being that this is an elected position. So politics will always be at play. And there's something to be said about a leader that can see the bigger picture and can understand the players that are at play.
Because you've been in it.
Yes, and the moves that need to be made in order to move this office forward. And so, there's great to throw out a couple of policies that you want to implement, but we're talking about making substantial change to this office. We've got folks that have been waiting on justice for far too long. I'm pretty sure we'll talk about the Meade trial at some point in this conversation. But the reality is that Mr. Goodson was shot December of 2020. And we're talking about a mistrial that just happened in January of 2024.
Right.
Or February of 2024. We haven't even talked about the pending civil suit that has been filed by Mr. Goodson's family that is still sitting there. And so literally what I'm saying is that it is hard to reform a system from the inside. I'm proud that I'm not a career prosecutor. And I've said this over and over again. I choose not to attack my opponents because this race is historic in and of itself. And what I refuse to do is to play a part in any way of belittling another Black person that has the courage to put their name in the hat to serve our community.
And I'm going to just be real with you.
Please.
You're also a Black woman. So I'm going to be real. Like I just said, I feel like when we are in certain positions, there are just certain things we cannot say and do that maybe someone else can do. And I definitely feel like that is across the spectrum. I've experienced that in my own career. So I think that, yes, it's a concerted choice on your part, but I also think that there are other implications, right, when you're running around identity. So that's first. Second, you mentioned like policies and being able to navigate the political sphere because you've been in it. One of the things that Anthony Pearson said when he came up here and I interviewed him was that he would like to implement sentencing guidelines because they don't currently exist in the office. And I think that sounds great. However, I know that we can want to do something, but just because you want to do something, somebody else would have done it if it was easy. Exactly. And I do think that there are always underlying political things happening that the public doesn't necessarily see that I think make it hard to always deliver on promises. So what I hear you saying is you would have a higher likelihood of being able to navigate around some of those dynamics that someone new coming in might not know about.
Without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, I think about what I was able to achieve just this past Monday with the amendments that we made to this $1.2 billion budget at council. These programs and initiatives and pieces of legislation don't just come out of thin air. I've said over and over again that I've got a demonstrated track record of success, not just passing legislation, but creating programs that get at the very heart of protecting public safety. That means knowing how to be a convener, knowing how to create a plan. I mentioned that I served as an executive director, helping to lead an organization through its first strategic planning since its original creation. These are skills that can't be taught overnight. And, you know, I chuckle a little bit because I truly do believe actions speak louder than your words. And you can always tell me, I can show you better than I can ever tell you, right? And so what I'm thinking about right now, what's coming to mind, is the campaign that I've done around housing in our community. Prior to 2019, when I came on council, we weren't talking about housing in our community the way that we're talking about it right now. Before the pandemic was upon us, I had the foresight and had put the team in place that put the program that became our emergency response for getting dollars out to the door already in place through the partnership of legal aid and impact. And so when the pandemic happened and when this community was infused with dollars, the policy and the blueprint was already in existence. I'm thinking about the program that I created in response to Mr. Goodson being taken away from us far too soon. He was a CDL driver. And I knew that I could not have any impact in his criminal justice case, his criminal case, excuse me, but I could do something that would improve the lives of others in our community. And so here we have a CDL program that's been operating since 2021. It's now just getting some press, but was able to secure $200,000 in the budget we just passed 2 days ago. So that is indicative of a leader who was going to be able to convene disparate individuals, disparate organizations, work with community leaders, whether they're pastors or regular old residents, and help to really change what's happening in our communities.
Yeah, you mentioned Casey, and I've asked the candidates a lot about police-involved shootings because those are the questions that I'm getting from the community. But the first question I want to ask you, because I want to make sure that we get to it, is do you believe the community has been calling for criminal justice reform forever? Since I've been here and from the community that I came from, this is a national, an international thing, right? Do you think that the system needs to be reformed, and what part would you have in that as if you were elected prosecutor?
You know, I think that without a shadow of a doubt, yes. But as someone who also very much knows a lot about history, I also believe that it's working the way in which it was designed.
Yes.
And so, whether we're talking about reforming or reimagining, we just know something has to happen in our community.
Yeah. I use the word reform. I'd like to see it go a little further, but
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
We have to meet people where they are. And I think a lot of people are in that like reform seat right now. So
absolutely. What I say all the time is that everyone has a role to play in dismantling systems that seek to oppress us. That's you, that's me, whether I'm elected or not. And so not only have you seen me out front marching with families and with community folks in our streets and going to events where I'm saying very loudly and very unequivocally where I stand on certain issues, but then I'm also putting my money where my mouth is and passing legislation that is going directly towards reimagining our safety forces and our policies at the local level. You have us seating and funding the first Civilian Police Review Board, the first Inspector General, funding the first Real-Time Crime Center and Office of Violence Prevention, funding alternative crisis response. I passed the first gun safety legislation in the city of Columbus, 3 pieces of legislation to deal with just common sense gun issues. Absolutely, we have to have reform of our current system. And as some of the most powerful actors in this system, prosecutors have a responsibility to reduce and repair the harms that have been caused by an unjust and equitable system. So don't tell me that your responsibility as a prosecutor is just to the letter of the law. You have the ability to go beyond. And in fact, you have a responsibility to ensure that you are focusing just as much on prevention and reform as you are and taking care of those bad guys as well.
So I heard you say 3 things, some explicitly, but another less explicitly. But I hear you saying like community, prevention. That is what personally I would like to see.
Yes.
Someone in a prosecutor's role also focus on are the systems, right? You mentioned systems that lead for someone to commit a crime. So how do we prevent these things from happening before we're putting people in pipelines to prison?
That's right.
Because I have said this on another show with another person that I interviewed, that I don't necessarily believe that jail rehabilitates people. The goal should be for people to not even get there, because once they're there, they're institutionalized.
Yeah.
And your options are limited. And so I want to hear a little bit more about how you plan to integrate community into your work as prosecutor.
You're so spot on right now. Historically, we have over-relied on antiquated policies and over-incarceration as a tool to get people to behave, right? Even though the data has shown us over and over again that it does nothing to disincentivize crime being committed in our community. The reality is that we're never going to prosecute our way out of what is transpiring in our community without changing the way in which we address public safety. And so what does that mean? It's not enough to respond to misbehavior. You also have to respond to the root causes of crime. And for some, that could be housing and food insecurity. It could be mental health issues or trauma. It could be wealth inequities that people are grappling with. But we can't pretend that these things are not interconnected and that there is not a role that can be played to further disincentivize folks committing crime. And so absolutely, I want to prioritize evidence-based and community-based organizations that are going to support and uplift our residents in our community. I want to be able to connect people to the proper resources that they need. And this is what can be done. Don't tell me it can't be done in the prosecutor's office. Just because you have never done it doesn't mean that it can't be done. And that is why the role that I had, as I served as an assistant city attorney was so powerful, because we didn't look at prosecution as just this transactional act between you presenting evidence against me for a crime that I committed, me going to jail, and then hoping that I don't commit crime again. No, what we were doing was transformative, because not only were we addressing the misbehavior, but we were also convening the stakeholders together that would come to support and fulfill whatever need is missing in that individual's lives. And that can help to reduce recidivism. I also want to increase the number of diversion programs that are currently offered. Right now, if we're talking just about at the county level, we have two diversion courts, one that addresses mental health, one that addresses drug usage. At the municipal level, we've got 6 or 7 diversion programs that address individuals who have drug addiction, to human trafficking and prostitution, to even a veterans court, and then also a youth-related program that I helped to start as a member of City Council. Youth crime is a problem in our community. And so, one of my priorities is to ensure that a pilot diversion program that is currently operating, all I got to say is Kia, y'all know what I'm talking about. That program can continue to have the funding that it needs to go beyond its level of service. And I think it is going, the pilot will end in May. And we know summer is just getting started right around the May time. Yeah. So not only do I want to work with community-based organizations, but I want to increase the number of diversion programs. And when I say diversion, let me be very clear that I'm not trying to make sure that someone's not being held accountable. That's the exact opposite of the purpose of a diversion program. It's to ensure that that person has the opportunity to be held accountable while also addressing the misbehavior, connecting them to whatever resources they need. And it does reduce the risk of recidivism in the future.
Yeah. Thank you for that. 'Cause that's been one of my, primary concerns and the concerns of the community. I want to shift gears a little bit because I want to ask you about some other things that have, come to me that people are interested in knowing about. Police-involved shootings. What is your stance on them, and how will you handle them if you're elected prosecutor?
So one of my policy platforms includes reimagining the organizational culture and the systemic policies of the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office.
So what does that mean in just regular English?
In regular English, it means we need more staff at the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office. I believe that every public institution should reflect the community that it serves. Okay. Currently in that office, there are 131 attorneys. 11 are attorneys of color.
That's disproportionate. Very much so. Yeah. Yes.
So if we have time, we will circle back around to that. But then on the policy side, we have got to formalize policies as to when a special prosecutor is going to be assigned in cases like police-involved shootings. Right now, there is no rhyme or reason for when a special prosecutor is being assigned. And we've heard some notions of conflicts of interest or not knowing enough facts, or various things I've heard over the last few months. But what it sounds to me is like a cherry picking of certain cases to ensure that there isn't a level of accountability in the future. And so
can I stop you please for 1 second? Because one question that I haven't asked people is to explain to the listeners what a special prosecutor is and what that person does. So can you do that first and then continue on with how you think that should be handled?
Yeah. So a special prosecutor is just a prosecutor that is not from the office. Okay. Right. We could go a little bit deeper than that, but just to be clear, that somebody who is not ingrained in the infrastructure of the office that would be being responsible for prosecuting the case. So a great example is that there were 2 attorneys who were handling the Jason Meade case. If folks are familiar, unfortunately, with the Takeya Young case, there are special prosecutors that have been appointed that are from Montgomery County, where Dayton is. Okay. And so there's some reciprocity there, because Franklin County might serve as a special prosecutor in a case that maybe Dayton might have to that degree. So what my stance is that I want to have conversations with the staff that are present currently in the office. I'm going to take the intake from staff. I'm going to take intake from the community and best practices and form a policy that the community can hold us to the best of our ability. The problem at the end of the day is that the community doesn't know who to hold accountable. If we, have a little future telling here, forecasting of what could potentially happen in the Tareya Young case. Well, who do we hold responsible if the result or the prosecution fails in some type of way? Do we hold Montgomery County accountable? And so I think that is just indicative once again of not formalizing some of the most uncomfortable cases and moments that we have to grapple with. That's also part of politics. Yeah. You can't skirt and choose when you want to deal with the hard thing or when you don't want to deal with the hard thing. I'm going to get a camera shoved in my face, whether I'm ready to talk about it or not. And we need to have someone that is ready to operate under that level of pressure, that is going to be able to communicate effectively what the policy decision is going to be. Another priority for me is really ushering in a new era with this office where it establishes a presence in our community. Currently, there is a level of absenteeism that I believe helps to foster mistrust from
I've
folks.
I've never seen Gary Tareya one time in my life ever. So
yeah,
just say that.
Yeah,
I think that's very important because, and not to cut you off.
Nope.
But I was very frustrated when the decision came down in Jason Mead's case, and there was a verdict, and then they went back, and then there was. It felt frustrating because it was confusing and because there was nothing that happened afterwards that explained to people why that happened. And so then it allows for people to draw their own conclusions. And I think that if there was more transparency, more of a community presence of the prosecutor's office in the community, that would not go away completely because that's going to take generations for that to happen. But I think that it would help.
Absolutely. Once again, how are you going to restore community trust if you're not transparent, if there's no level of accountability that is coming from your office? And so on that day alone, literally within a span of, I believe, 20 minutes, we heard a verdict, it was retracted, and then an hour later, we got the same verdict again. And so for the Goodson family alone, that is tragic. Right. Yeah. And they have had to grapple with this unsettledness for the last 3+ years. Right. Yeah. And then to be taken, it's a miscarriage of justice all the way together. And so, I want to formalize these policies to the best of my ability, but I also want to be proactive in the way in which we communicate what is happening with the case itself. As much that can be relayed to the general public, I want to be out on the forefront of that. So that would have immediately been a press conference where we had a conversation to relay all of the information and establish what our priorities were going to be for this case moving forward, right? But we didn't see that. And everyone else had the opportunity to kind of make up what they thought was happening with that case.
Yeah. And you mentioned processes too. Another thing that I think people have, and you only have so much purview into this because you're not in the office, but what took so long potentially to try that case? I mean, from the day that Casey was murdered till just a month ago, that was when the trial happened. That was damn near over 3 years.
Yeah, 2020.
What causes something to take that long? And what are the steps that need to be taken so that doesn't happen anymore? Yeah.
Without a shadow of a doubt, these cases have to be prioritized, period. They are. They're some of the most critical cases that have to be tried in the current season that we live in, where people feel as if there is two criminal justice systems that are operating at the same time. And so you've got to think about, these are some of the hardest cases to prosecute. We are talking about an immense amount of evidence that has to be combed through, let alone finding the quote special prosecutor who is willing to take this case on, that has the skill level to be able to prosecute that case. There are a lot of reasons why this case could be delayed, and none of them are good enough reason to tell a mother that you got to wait 3 years before we know whether or not there will be some accountability in your case.
Yeah. I always try to, this is, my job, but I feel some kind of way about that because just the birthdays, the sunrises, the sunsets that she's had to live without her son and all of the siblings. It's just, I want to hear that somebody's going to do something about that. That's one. Two is there are over 200 murder cases backlogged right now. What would be your plan? Is that a process issue? I
think it's a process issue. I think it's a staffing issue.
Okay.
One thing that I've been shedding light on is that Franklin County has 1.3 million residents and about 130 attorneys in the prosecutor's office. Cuyahoga County has 1.2 million residents and a little over 230 attorneys. Oh. And so it doesn't excuse a backlog to that extent, but it does shed a little bit of light on the reality that I believe many of those prosecutors are grappling with right now. Your days are constantly, you are going round the clock.
Yeah.
And you need some help, right? So staffing issues are number one. But then I want to also start talking about some out-of-the-box ideas to address the backlog. I want to talk about, inviting a special judge, a visiting judge to come in and hold a docket that could help move through some of these cases. I want to talk about putting a policy in place that ensures that there's vertical prosecution for all homicide cases. I want to talk about maybe some real out-of-the-box ideas. One of the policies that have come out of the General Assembly, there's a lot that has come out of the General Assembly, but one that has come out of the General Assembly is the amendments to the Stand Your Ground provision, which removes the duty to retreat. And so you've got folks that are asserting this as a defense left and right here. And unfortunately, that has caught the prosecutor's office off guard. So what does it look like to proactively invite a defendant to assert that defense before a grand jury and see if we've got something there? How can we properly train and prepare our prosecutors for handling those types of cases? So I've got some ideas that I believe would help to assist us in moving through those cases, but they are top priority for me.
You mentioned staff, and we talked a little bit about lack of diversity in the office. What would you do about that? Like, what's your experience with kind of coming in and trying to ensure that your offices and your staff reflect the community?
Yeah, I mean, this is a switch to this office. What I'm talking about here, we have to acknowledge that this office has been Republican controlled for a few decades before Mr. Tareya took office, and a leader is able to critically assess what is happening in an environment without trying to preserve some level of, feeling good about what you've done in that office or where that office stands. And so I have been critical of the current environment because I have spoken to individuals of color, attorneys of color, who have been hired and then since decided to leave that office because of the environment that has been fostered.
So it's a culture issue.
It is absolutely a culture issue. And so, once again, going into the space and assessing it for myself. But we've got to talk about new recruitment strategies. Once again, having had the opportunity to be fully submerged into this community, I've built many relationships that I would lean on in this capacity, whether it's with the law schools that I've built those relationships. How do we foster relationships in creating a pipeline of students and attorneys and paralegals who want to do public service work? How can we ensure that folks who are in the office feel seen and feel heard? And so let's talk about affinity groups that help support diversity in office settings. Let's also acknowledge that we've got to pay folks a good job, a good living wage in order to do this type of work that we're asking them to do. I would say that once again, your actions speak louder than your words. And I have been in many positions in the past where I didn't have a title, but I had a vision and I knew how to execute that vision. And it should be concerning that there have been the opportunities to increase the level of diversity in that office just within the past year. And we're still struggling to talk about what that pipeline looks like.
Yeah.
It's also the sentiment that I hear all the time at the city. Well, there are no Black construction folks. There are no Black folks in trade. There are no Black attorneys.
So build a pipeline.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's what I'm going to be focused on.
Thank you.
And then
you
have to also create an environment where people want to do the work.
Yeah.
There was
culture is everything.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
That people want to show up and do the good thing, that they know that the work that they are doing, there's a reason why most of us went into public service.
Or believing that the work that they're doing actually has a meaning.
Absolutely.
That it's going to grow into something else.
Absolutely.
I work in public service as well. Not public service, but I work nonprofits and very same types of sentiments in some ways. And yeah, if you don't believe that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, then you can't do the work optimally.
But, I want to make sure, because when I'm talking about diversity, I'm not just talking about Black and white diversity.
Across the spectrum.
It's across the spectrum, right? Once again, these offices, these institutions should reflect the community that it serves, right? We're not going to pretend that bias doesn't exist. We know that it exists, and it's definitely prevalent in the criminal justice system. And whether you're Black, white, old, or young, you need to know when you walk into that courtroom and there's a prosecutor on one side and a judge on another, that there's somebody there that is going to see you and your human experience and is going to advocate and fight for you regardless of how much money you have at the end of the day.
Right.
I know that had I not been the prosecutor on the other side of that table, that someone would have lost their home, that somebody would have went to jail, that they would have lost their opportunity for a second chance. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so I had just had this conversation with some folks of color last night. And there's this assumption that, why would you want to go be a top cop? Right.
Yeah, because that's...
Yeah.
I definitely have said the prosecutor's the top cop.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. But if we're going to talk about criminal justice reform, how can you reform a system if you don't know how that system works? It's the assumption that either Black people, I'm going to speak specifically about Black people, have more of a prevalence for criminality. And that means that we just need to defend each other. No, we need to be a part of every level of the system. So whether that's sitting behind the bench, or if it's the prosecutor bringing the case, or the defense attorney, or the bailiff, we are vast in our experiences and in our advocacy. And if we want to ask for changes to be made, we also have to be a part of that change. That's why I always lead with that we can be the change that we want to see.
Thanks for that perspective.
Absolutely.
I want to ask you 2 more questions because, like I said, I know you're a busy woman, so you have something right after this. So the first questions that I have and questions that came from the community. You are on city council and you're now running for prosecutor. Many people that I have spoken to, one of their concerns is competitive elections in Columbus. What made you make the decision to run for prosecutor while holding the seat at council? I want you to explain that kind of thought process to people because I do think that there are some folks who have questions about that.
Absolutely. Before I answer the question, though, I will have to preface this with the fact that this is one of those issues that I believe, me being a woman, absolutely allows this to continue to be a question that is had. Because I am not the first person who has gone through an election, and because of the way our election cycles are, has made a decision to run for a different seat.
Okay. So it's happened before.
Oh, it has happened even as members of council and folks who are sitting in current seats right now.
So you're like,
and that has received support from the party. It's received support from colleagues and this community.
Okay.
Right. So there is, once again, we're picking and choosing how we're going to be angry at folks. And then there's also this notion that as a woman, you are also not allowed to be ambitious, that there is this be grateful for what you have right now. And I'm absolutely grateful for the honor of serving my community as a member of Columbus City Council. But I believe wholeheartedly that public service is a calling. And when preparation and opportunity meet, you are compelled to respond. I have learned a lot. In my years as a community advocate, as an executive leader in this community, now as an elected official, about how the system works. And we have an opportunity to truly transform a space that has truly been a tool of oppression in our community. And
so you felt it was time is what I'm hearing you say.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I heard you say at the beginning of the show that you didn't have any lawyers in your family.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like in your heart, that's who you are. Yeah. So you're sitting on council and using your skills, but
and
inside you are an attorney. Yeah. And that's what you want to sort of navigate through.
And I think that, and let me also clarify for the record, last year was a historic year for the city of Columbus because city council changed its structure. It hadn't been changed ever. Right. And so we expanded from 7 members to 9 members. Right. We also transitioned into a hybrid district system. And so when I had submitted my paperwork for reelection, this thought wasn't even something that crossed my mind. Okay. And no one else had filed to run. So I did not prevent anyone else from moving forward in this seat. And I'm going to tell you what else was incredibly important to me. And we would have to have another podcast for this.
Yeah, because I'm watching I know I don't want you to be late for the debate with all the people that will be there.
But I will say that issue 1 was on the ballot last year. And as someone who feels very strongly about protecting the rights of women and those who identify as women, that was my priority last year. Okay. And so I lost time on this campaign trail. I don't get any cool points with the electorate because I'm on city council. I am fighting for my, quote, life as it relates to the position that I am vying for right now. Yeah. And so just like the other candidates, and just like I asked the party to allow us to present our case to Franklin County residents, and we demonstrate why we should be the next Franklin County prosecutor.
Thanks for that. Last thing I want to ask is what I've asked everybody. I have, while I think it's great to see myself reflected as a Black woman or a Black person in politics, I have just seen too many people who have the same skin color as me who are not necessarily invested in us as a people. So it's been a lot made about the fact that this is a historic race because there are 3 Black candidates. But why should people trust you beyond just that?
Oh, you know me. You know me. You've seen me. You have seen me around. You have probably hung out with me at some point in time. This is exactly who you get. I am a fighter. I'm an advocate. I'm a public servant. I'm a woman on a mission to leave my community and this world better than I found it. I show up as myself every single time. And so you don't see me capitalizing on trauma for political points. You see me behind the scenes advocating and making the sausage, right? That's what I'm focused on. And that's who I'm going to continue to be, whether I'm in this office or out of office. This is who and what I am. I made a decision at an early age that I was going to be a part of the solution. And so I have checked my ego at the door over and over. And in fact, I am a woman of faith. And I have asked I have asked God over and over again, if this is not what you would have for me, I will gladly back out. So this is not ego that's controlling this at all. But once again, you can hire attorneys, and there is a great staff that excels at trial advocacy in that office right now. But the buck starts and stops with you as the chief legal officer of the 3rd largest firm in Franklin County. I have the vision, I have the experience, I have the conviction to be the change that we need in Franklin County. And I prayerfully ask for everyone's vote March 19th.
Where can people find out more information about you? Where can they follow you and learn more about your campaign?
Absolutely. You can check me out at www.shaylafavor.com. Okay. I am literally on all social media platforms, including TikTok.
Yeah, I saw your TikTok.
Yes, okay. I just started this series. Called Who Are You and Why Are You Running for Office? And it's really about me meeting people where they're at. A lot of today's episode was really breaking down what the job of a prosecutor is. You know, I want people to understand who I am and what drives me, what my vision is for the office. You mentioned that I'm getting ready to head to another candidate forum, and those really don't provide the opportunity for residents to truly get to know who the candidate is and if you can trust them.
Yeah.
You know, everyone that
it's quick.
Exactly. Yeah. Everyone that might look like you might not be for you.
No, they're not. Right. So we just
do your research.
Please do your research.
Do your research.
But thank you so much. I appreciate you and looking forward to the results of the campaign.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity.
Of course.
All in favor.